There's a very well-known, well-known man of God. If I named his name, everyone would know him, who was at a conference one day and brought forth in a very untactful way, some would say, the reality that many people have focused and fixated themselves on being a preacher when they were supposed to do something else. Question is, do you believe that you and your future helpmate will share the same compatible ministries? All right, cool. So again, do you believe that you and your future helpmate, helpmeet, I think is the way I'll read it, helpmeet will share the same compatible ministries? All right, so here's the deal. With me personally, as you guys see, Yapastolic TOTDs is an online ministry. All right. And we're doing a lot of things by the grace of God. And, there's a lot of people being impacted. I think over across all our social media platforms, we have like 23,000 people following us. By the grace of God, we have over like 750,000 views. Okay. That's 750,000 views. And I've taught that many Bible studies. That's how I like to say it, because each person who watches, a video is getting taught a Bible study, really. No matter if they're in church, outside of church. I mean, it's awesome. So when we talk about compatibility, though, in a relationship, it's really about like the two working together. And what I've seen so far is I believe that my future helpmeet would be able to be compatible with the ministry of Yapa. I believe that should be able to aid and help. And I believe that should be able to bring life, a certain type of life, of vigor, vivaciousness, to Yapastolic TOTDs as a ministry. But I'm not gonna set that as like, for me personally, I'm not gonna set that as like the goal or the orientation. I'm not gonna orientate myself towards that. And the reason why is because I just, I want to be sure that I'm led by the Holy Ghost in everything. And if he hasn't told me anything about my future spouse and her capacity to aid in the ministry, that I'm in, then he hasn't told me. And if it's not really in his mind, then I don't want to put that in my mind. All right, you have to be careful, because here's the deal. Sometimes we can have this fanciful idea of what we want in life. All right, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your work, whatever it may be, your ministry, right? We have this idea. Some of us imagine ourselves behind a pulpit. Some of us imagine us with a specific person, or maybe someone who looks like a certain person. So, but when we have to be careful, because if we lock that into the way we think about, the way we think about those things, whether it's ministry or whatever, then we can derail ourselves from the plan of God. And I've seen a lot of people do this. I've seen a lot of young people like, oh, man, I want to be used of God, so I have to be a preacher. All right, let's take a step back. You don't have to preach in order to be used of God. Okay? Yes, you're supposed to go ye therefore and teach all nations. On Matthew 28:19. Yes, we have that mandate. Yes, we do, or we are supposed to. But that doesn't mean you have to be behind a pulpit. And there's a very well-known, well-known man of God. If I named his name, everyone would know him, who was at a conference one day and, brought forth in a very untactful way, some would say, the fact that the reality that a lot of people who let's see, how are we going to say this? Many people have traveled, like focused and fixated themselves on being a preacher when they were supposed to do something else. God's intention was for them to do something else. Just like God's intention was for Adam and Eve to stay in the garden, but then they did their own thing, right? And in them doing their own thing, God still worked with them. He slayed a lamb, he covered them, some would say a lamb, but he gave them clothes, and he's like, you know what, we're going to patch this back up. All right? And was it the will of God? No, it wasn't the perfect will of God, but it was what some would say the permissible will of God. Well, okay, cool. So if you have this idea of a spouse, you have to be careful to only take, and just with every word from God that you get, you have to be careful to take the pieces of what he's saying and take it for what he's saying. Don't add to it. Oftentimes we get to adding to it because we think of it a certain way. Oh, God said I'm going to marry a man of God, so I'll marry a preacher. Whoa, 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 whoa. No, he said a man of God. You were prophesied over that you were going to marry a man of God, not a preacher. Because I tell you this, not all preachers are men of God, and not all men of God are preachers. All right? So you have to be careful. So with me, I'm careful to do that. Not saying I haven't, not saying I'm not guilty. I just understand that humans have this tendency of like wrapping it and packaging it in a way that it's really not. So you have to be careful. With that being said, again, to answer the question, do you believe that your future, you and your future helpmate will share the same compatible ministries? She could definitely help me. But I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking at that as a requirement. Like, oh, she has to be, doing this because, she's going to be my spouse. It's like, no, she could, literally not know anything about technology as long as she's able to be my spouse. That's the main thing. Okay, cool. So that's that question. Next.